Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcast where we don't write any code, but apps are generated for us. It's pure magic and pure bliss. And this is another edition of Frank Loves AI. And Frank,
Oh, hi.
Frank,
Hi, James.
how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. Yeah, remember back in the day when every time I said I wanted to talk about AI, you rolled your eyes? And now it's just AI all the time. We are that AI, mobile development, sometimes .NET podcast. Hello, everyone.
It's very true. I mean, we got away from it last week, and I don't know how our listeners felt about talking about your cat. Anyways, cat update. It's been a few weeks. How's the cat?
Oh, Cat is wonderful. Cat's probably not going to make it into his room because I sadly shut the door before Cat could get into the room. But Cat has been nothing but fantastic. It is a fantastic cat.
Nice.
I want to complain, but I don't really have any complaints other than I'll say cat number 1 and cat number 2 are not 100% happy with each other in the household. So we will keep you up to date because I know everyone cares how the cats are getting along in the household. But little Ari is doing wonderful. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. Good. That's good to hear. We have been playing around with a lot of AI, specifically a lot of Copilot. We've been getting some access to GitHub Spark. We're going to do a whole podcast on that upcoming just because we have just been playing around with it. Frank just got his hands on it, been building applications live. Now, if you're interested in learning Frank doing that live, you can subscribe to our Patreon feed at patreon.com/mergeconflictfm. Link in the show notes. You can get a free sub to that too, like free trial basically. So if you want to just listen to that, good to go. We drop bonus episodes on occasion. You get episodes there first. But Frank, our good friends over at Apple, small little multi-trillion-dollar company, decided not too long ago that they wanted to give away free on-device AI to developers, which sounds delectable. As also your Copilot Plus PCs from Windows and Microsoft also have some of this stuff for free. But Frank, we did an entire episode right after WWDC where you did a video on your YouTube, Frank Codes, on using the built-in Apple Intelligence APIs for Apple to do a bunch of stuff. And your video is really good. It breaks down a whole bunch of different things where you're comparing it against different services and different models and things like that. But Frank, you were doing that in Swift, but now you can do it in C#. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, it is, James. I want to get to so many levels, but basically, I just wanted to add AI to all my apps. Like, I have a lot of classic apps, and especially after we were talking about the VS Code Copilot extension and talking about ways to integrate your like data models with the AI, I kind of wanted to just do some experiments and like see how that would all fit into my kind of apps. Now, sadly, during the beta craziness times, Apple keeps changing their APIs. Microsoft doesn't have bindings to it, especially like there's a lot of Swiftisms with the current Apple Intelligence stuff. And so I just decided, you know what? I ain't got patience for any of this. I'm just going to write my own library so I can just talk to Apple Intelligence and the system large language models that are on device and available to all apps so long as the users have a vaguely recent device and lots of memory to spend on that device. But yeah, I have a lot of classic apps that I want to AI power and I wanted that library. So I wrote it. And I have a lot of opinions now about Apple Intelligence and tool calling and the use of small models versus big models and all that. So maybe we can get into it.
Yeah, I'm ready to get into it. I thought that it was pretty neat. And I've obviously been playing around with a lot of different AI models and did some experimentation with feedback flow and a few other things recently. And obviously, I've been really playing around with tons of different AI things, obviously, not only in code editors, but outside of code editors. So yeah, I'm excited to see one, mostly like how you went around creating the binding. I looked at your little binding. It seems pretty small in general.
Hey, now. Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot of features to Apple Intelligence, but fundamentally, calling these large language models is kind of easy, right? There's a prompt.
Yeah.
You send it some text, and it gives you some text back. And so my library right now is incomplete. I have a little feature list of things I'm working on, but that core feature of let's run the model and have it operate in like a nice async fashion and have like async and await working and all that, is up and running. And yeah, it didn't take too much code for that because it's not doing the hard parts. It's not doing the tool calling. It's not doing the response format, giving back structured data right now. But yeah, just giving it a prompt, getting some text back, and maintaining a little bit of a history so you could create like a chat style app. It's really not that much code to call into these. And I, like usual, I want to applaud Apple. They tend to come up with pretty good API designs and all that kind of stuff. And the simple use case is pretty simple. Now, I appreciate that compliment from you because you obviously haven't seen the disaster that is the tool calling that I've had to implement for this thing. I have proxy objects, I have wrapper objects, I have static allocations mixed in with dynamic allocations. We can get into all that. Doesn't really matter. Those are implementation details that my library will take care of for people. But the important thing was I wanted to be able to take an app that's not my apps have old OS requirements. So I think like I require iOS 13 in most of my apps,
Mm-hmm.
but these models only exist on iOS 26. So the things that I really wanted to make sure were working well was fallbacks. So you can detect whether you actually have access to the system language models, and that it dies gracefully, throws an exception in the nice C# way, doesn't crash your app. That's kind of the most important thing. It's not like, oh my God, there's a missing binary or something, crash. So I just wanted to make sure that even old apps can opt into using these. Users can opt into them if their phones support it. So I wanted to make sure I had that part working correctly before I got too crazy.
That makes sense. Is this the first time that you've done one of these wrappers around Swift APIs with like some of the new stuff, or?
Yeah, it is actually. Now that you bring that up, so we did a podcast a while ago where was it .NET 9 or 8, where you were actually able to include an Xcode project into your app.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, that has really changed my life because you can now write some code in Swift, put a few Objective-C labels on it, because that's what the .NET iOS bindings like to talk to, is an iOS Objective-C kind of
Objective-C.
interface. And it just makes it so much easier. And this is definitely the first time I've done that, where I've done a binding to a Swift library. I've done Objective-C bindings tons in the past. This is the first time I've tried to bind to a Swift library, which is a lot trickier because, like I just said, .NET iOS wants to talk to Objective-C. So you have to give it kind of a more Swift code can be really ugly with their use
Yeah.
of generics and protocols and all that kind of stuff. And so you have to give it a nice clean interface to talk to. And this was the first time I felt like I actually had enough knowledge and the tooling was in a good place where I could actually create a binding to Swift.
Hmm.
And honestly, we could do a whole podcast on just that because this was probably the best binding I've ever created before. Usually I have to make just an absolute mess of make files that are compiling, a native library individually for every platform, then creating fat binaries and then linking them into my binding thing, doing all this gross stuff. And nowadays it's really nice. You can just reference an Xcode project right in a C# binding project. And the magic of .NET Build just handles all that garbage for you. Thank goodness. I should say, as long as it's not a beta of Xcode, then GitHub Actions kind of fail, but it works great on the dev machine. It
There
doesn't
you
work
go.
great
Yeah,
in
yeah.
CI right now.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know how that works. I guess you gotta wait. There's not like an. I guess
um,
you have to wait until they install some certain beta on the machines, huh?
yeah, exactly. So this is tangential to it all, but like GitHub Actions has one Xcode 26, but it's the first beta.
Oh,
And already as Apple's already broken their API from the first beta. So when I'm coding against, I'm using beta 4 at the moment. I'm dating this episode, but the action is back on beta 1. There's API differences already.
yeah.
So it's just, and then it's worse than that. They're literally running out of hard drive space on their GitHub action images.
Ah,
And
yeah.
so they don't actually install the iOS SDK anymore, which
Ah,
is Great. So you have to manually install the iOS SDK. None of that matters. None of that has to do with my binding because I can still just compile it on my machine. I create a NuGet and I upload that NuGet, and the magic of NuGet and C# and .NET kick in. No one who consumes this library has to care about any of that stuff. As a developer, it's a little bit annoying, but I think all that annoyance will go away after the beta period is done with.
Yeah, it's cool. You got Cross Intelligence. That's the name of the NuGet, and it's Cross Intelligence, a cross-platform library for integrating Apple Intelligence and other external LLMs into .NET and .NET MAUI applications. Now, I assume that used by version frameworks targets, wait a second, what? .NET 9, iOS, Mac, Android, and Mac Catalyst? Doesn't even make any sense. What about Windows? You forgot about Windows. You can still build that.
Yeah, sorry, everyone. I'm working on it.
Well, I don't know how that would work. Actually, that's fascinating.
Well, like you said, I'm assuming all the big players will catch up and have on-device networks at some point. So I have a .NET 9 because we'll talk about this, but I also want to talk to external models like OpenAI
for
and
fallback.
Anthropic. Not just fallback, upgrades. So okay, we'll just get into it because I can't
I'm ready.
beat around the bush here.
Yeah, do it.
Look,
I'm ready.
I love Apple Intelligence. I'm an Apple fanboy. I have my Apple shirt on and everything. But there's limitations to what a 2 gigabyte, 3 gigabyte network can do versus a giant GPT 4.1 living out on the cloud, or an Anthropic or a Gemini. They are different classes of neural networks. So while I have been a big proponent of running neural networks right on the device, I think there's a lot of good security, privacy, performance, money reasons to run that network on your device. They are small and they can be frustratingly dumb sometimes.
Yeah.
And so what I learned in a lot of my experiments, I've been doing a lot of work with the Apple Intelligence lately, is you outgrow it kind of quick. And it's frustrating to build a bunch of code around an API like the Apple Intelligence calling into the network, and then realizing I really do need to, not as a backup, but as a feature plus, to be able to talk to OpenAI or Azure or someone else and make my model requests through the internet so I can access a more powerful network. And so one of the reasons I built this this library, was to make that code path simpler in my code, where I can have the exact same code. I just say, please by default, run locally, use the system model, but then with literally not even a line change, you can just give it different data. It'll access OpenAI or something like that. From a development point of view, I needed that simple, uniform way to access all the services because you get frustrated with those small models eventually.
Now, is there a way when you're calling OpenAI, you're just calling OpenAI like APIs directly, or like?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Nothing magic here. I could have gone through, any of the .NET ML things, but it's an API call. Like, calling a web API is not hard. And the most important thing I wanted to have correct was the tool calling, because there's a very specific way that Apple has you invoke tools, and tools, like we covered in the previous episodes, are the ways these models are going to access your data model.
Yeah.
A big lesson I learned immediately was, especially with these small models, you don't want them generating your entire output all in one go. They just can't do it. They lack the context, B, they lack the intelligence. You can't just say, like, let's say I'm building a robot designing app. I can't say, build me a humanoid robot and just expect it to, output everything needed to build a humanoid bipedal robot. But what it is good at doing is saying, here's an existing robot I have, add a leg. Okay, add a joint to a leg. Make that leg do this at this time. Doing incremental changes. And so what I've really learned is these tool calls are kind of the right way to integrate AI into your app. And what the tool call allows is for the neural network to modify your data model within the app. Instead of outputting a whole new data model or outputting the whole thing, it can make incremental changes here or there, mutate your data model. And that's the way I'm personally finding is the sweet spot for integrating AIs into my apps.
Gotcha. Very interesting. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I think I like the idea of that. It kind of reminds me of I mean a little bit of how actually like um the extensions AI stuff works is the whole idea is it's sort of independent of specific models or specific backends or something that has like plugin architecture, right? So you're kind of create your own little plugin architecture with a sort of an Apple Intelligence first sort of mentality.
Yeah. And what I'm learning is these tools kind of become an API into your data model. So
Mm.
if I'm building this robot builder, I would have like add joint, add block,
Yeah.
add sensor here. You and I'm not sure this is the final place I'm going to be, but I'm finding I'm implementing a lot of CRUD, create, read, update, delete tools that I give the AI access to. So now it can go and do fine grained changes to my data model without me just giving a big JSON dump of my data model and asking for a big JSON dump of the finished data model back. It can just go in and precisely bit by bit modify that data model as it needs to accomplish the task the user requested. So, all that's to say is tool calling to me has become very important. And in the case of Apple Intelligence, that's where the API is very Swift heavy. It is it is the swiftiest of Swift APIs you've ever seen. It's pulling out every trick the little Swifties have. And that's where I wanted to get my integration right.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because I don't know if I've seen other sort of integrations go this route. And the fascinating when we talk about tool calling is I often and immediately think of basically MCP servers, but also like when you're in using agent mode in VS Code or Visual Studio, it is calling tools. Basically, it is exposing a set of tools to LLMs. Now, often there are proprietary like tools and like how it calls into them and knows how to call these specific things and register them. So like the ones that are built in that are there, or the ones that are Apple Intelligence, like these are Apple Intelligence tools with an API and an interface and things that you're exposing. I can see that you're exposing inside of here. You have an iIntelligence tool, which is a name description and an execute method with an input, which is fascinating. And what's really fascinating about that is it's nearly identical to how you would implement an MCP server. And
Yeah.
MCP
Yeah.
servers are model context protocol servers. It's a protocol to provide context to models, and specifically LLMs, be able to invoke different tools, but they can do other things too. But that's one of the main use cases for them. And we had MCP Dev Days last week. We had
Yeah.
people from Anthropic and Neon and AWS and a bunch of different companies working on it on MCP of standardizing the way of doing tool calling. So, for example, if you develop an MCP server, like the GitHub MCP server, for example, it can automatically connect and figure out authentication, but it can do different calls to get repos, create an issue, get
Yeah.
issues, query things, get code bases, things like that through the API remotely or on device. Um, and you basically expose these tools to it. Now you can then install that MCP server through the standard sort of JSON configuration in VS Code, Visual Studio, Claude Desktop, other IDEs that are editors, right, that are MCP clients. So what's fascinating is that Apple, has adopted this model that we are basically our applications are creating these sets of tools. Our
Yeah.
application is an MCP server in a way, exposing
Yeah.
tools to the LLM. I am curious, is there a limit to the amount of tools that you can give it?
Not technically, or at least Apple has refused to document any kind of limitation like that.
Hmm.
I know like OpenAI will recommend that you stay around the 20 limit for your tools. And I haven't really hit a limit, but you think about as any kind of limit any of these LLMs will provide. If you give it a list of 10,000 tools, what are the chances it's going to pick the right tool?
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying I'm right now a lot of the tools I'm implementing are CRUD operations, which I don't feel great about
Mm.
because I can see that expanding too fast. So for every kind of data object I have, I would have four-ish tools. These are rough numbers, but that's not a good growth pattern for me. So
Mm.
personally, I would like my tools to be a little bit higher level. So I'm working on that, and it's going to be different for every app. If you have a simple data model, then you'll be fine if you implement CRUD operations for every kind of data thing that you have in your app. But if you have, let's say, like a CAD app that has millions of entities, or at least realistically hundreds of types of entities and things like that, you don't want to have 400 tools to have an AI manipulate them. You need higher level tools.
Mm.
But yeah, what you said about there's a very close correspondence between tools and MCP servers. I think it really just depends on who's consuming them and who's providing them. The GitHub MCP server, you can think of it as an API for talking to GitHub. That's
Yeah.
all it really is in the end. It's a fancy new protocol for doing that, but it's just another API for manipulating the GitHub data model.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm in my app, in the process of my app, and I'm running neural networks, I also need to manipulate my data model. There's no point in going through all the hubbub of writing an MCP server for all that. That's an extra layer that just doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
Instead, you just say to the AI, to the network, here's a tool. Here's how you add a add a joint to a robot, add a sensor to a robot, add a motor to a robot. Here are the tools to do that, and it can just execute those tools and modify the data model right there. So how you want to think about it, MCP servers, tools, they're all vaguely the same thing. It's just who's calling whom, who's providing them. I think in the future, like, I might want to consume MCP servers, but in that case, those would be more like plugins.
Okay.
Those would be just the way MCP is used right now. These are plugins to an AI. Whereas when I'm integrating AI into my app, I want it to have intimate knowledge and have local tools it can use anytime it needs to access my data model for
Mm.
my app.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I need to go back to the Microsoft Extensions AI to see like how that works specifically. If there's some API to do that, it'd be really
Yeah.
fascinating because it's inside of your code, right? So what you would
Yeah.
want it to do is do
And it's
something. Okay,
real.
so no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well,
Sorry.
it's real data. So like when I create a tool, you're actually giving it an instance of an object. I made it an interface in this code because I just wanted to be nice and generic. But you imagine when I create one of these tools, I give it a pointer to my data model. And then that tool can manipulate a pointer, a reference. And that can just, start manipulating that object graph in any way. I can implement any C# code I want within that execute function to
Hmm.
manipulate my object. And it's nice. You don't no server needed, no
Yeah.
interprocess communication, none of that nonsense. It's just taking some data from the AI, implementing it, and giving back a response. It's very
Yeah.
clean, honestly.
Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. It's basically functions that your thing can invoke
It's
and
an
do.
API.
It's an API. You give it an API to the model that can determine what you want to do. So when the user says, "Oh, create a new widget to do this thing," blah blah blah, like can parse it, the names, the descriptions, things like that. Very
Yeah.
fascinating. Very very fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, so just going back to the cross intelligence library I wrote, the big problem I was having was from Swift. It's all beautiful and easy, but it's a very Swift heavy API for all
Mm.
that tool calling. So I had to do a little bit of nastiness, but I'm trying to hide most of that for the user, so that we can just make it very simple. Just implement the iTool interface on any hunk of code that you want, and that can go and manipulate everything. And I'll take care of the nastiness of converting your beautiful C# code into Swift callable, handling, creating all the schemas needed, parsing the arguments, doing all that nastiness. I'll just do all that for you. And I'm saying do that for you. I'm doing it for myself because I don't want to write all that code. I don't want to back into all this. And honestly, even when I'm writing Apple Intelligence code in Swift, I find a lot of it annoying. Just the way they've implemented it. They have a lot of Swiftisms like non-isolated and non-mutability. Everything has to be sendable. It's
Mm.
all just gross and over-engineered. And so I'm just trying to prevent the happy C# world where you just implement the interface and I'll take care of all that nastiness for you.
No, that's really neat. Actually, I mean, I like it a lot. I want to play around with it now because I feel as though I could easily, you know, start to create a mobile version of feedback flow that for all intents and purposes has all the function backends, but you could do all that social analysis once you have everything
Yeah,
on device. There's really no reason to do it in the cloud 100%. I mean,
right.
there is a reason, but like I could do native integrations. I could say, okay, like give it back in a specific format that I can do XYZ with basically and display things here 100%, and then I could decide what I want to do with it, which is really neat. So very cool. I like it a lot. I feel as
And
though as I've been vibe coding more things, it's like we were talking about Spark, but Spark gives you like data and it gives you like AI access right away. I'm like, oh yeah, I just want like give me something so I can prototype with it, right? Because like you're saying, it's like, well, let me get off the ground running, and then maybe I need to upgrade later on, but maybe you don't for certain things.
yeah, exactly. And so like once I got all this tool calling down and I'm starting to understand, oh, this is the way that the AI can access my data model and it can do all
Mm.
this stuff. That's when I started hitting the limits of on-device networks. Because now,
Uh,
now that I've made it easy for it to manipulate my data model, I'm like, well, now I wanted to do more advanced manipulations. I wanted to be smarter, and so I didn't want to have to take all that code and turn it into pick your library of choice for talking to an AI. I wanted to have the same code that I was writing for all those tool integrations be the same code that I would run for Anthropic or OpenAI or Azure or Google. Who cares? Because all those just provide a thing. So I just want to make sure I, as a developer, can
mm,
just change one parameter to a function and access any model out there and not have to re architect my app for someone else's business because that upgrade path will happen. So if
yeah.
someone's on an airplane or they don't want to pay for the pro version of your app, you absolutely should allow them to access all these features, all these AI features using the system model. And then if they subscribe to the pro version of your app, because now you're paying dollars and cents per request, then you can say, "Oh, here's OpenAI," and get them your access token somehow. That's the hardest part. But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, without you changing any code, you can access far more powerful AIs and all that. So
That's
that
cool.
was really what happened. Is I kind of after talking about the VS Code Copilot thing, I realized, oh, tools are the way to go for all this stuff. Then I went all in on tools, and then I got frustrated by the limitations of the system neural network. And I wanted all that simple, beautiful tool integration without having to write MCP servers, still accessing more powerful networks. So that was the real birth of this library
Well,
to
so
handle all of that.
how did you accomplish that? I mean, like, so when you send like the request off to the model, are you passing in like a list of potential tools, and then it would like call back
Yes,
in? So it's going
exactly.
to call back into the library to do something.
Yeah, yep. So like if you
Interesting.
say respond, that's my main entry point. I stole that from Apple. Um, and you give it a list of all the tools it's allowed to access. The way, for example, OpenAI works, that's the API I know the best. It'll send you back not the complete response, but it'll say tool invocations. It'll say which tools it wants to invoke, which arguments to pass to those. I will then, because I have a list of all your tools and you named all your tools, it's nice and easy for me to make that correlation. I call your tools, they manipulate your data model. I collect all the data that your tool, your thing manipulating the data model wants to output back to the network. I upload that back to OpenAI. So this is back and forth with the advanced models.
Mm.
And then we keep playing that back and forth game until GPT is happy or Gemini is happy. Who cares? And then when it's done, respond is done. Um,
Mm.
I'll say right now I have a little limitation where my tool execute can't be async, but I'm working on that. That's not even like an OpenAI thing. OpenAI, I could make an async execute work just fine. It's on the Swift side, the Apple Intelligence side. I'm having a little bit of trouble, but I'm I'm working on it. So right now, your data model manipulation tools have to run synchronously, but honestly, it's not a big deal. They can just run on a background thread. It's all good. But I hope to have that async also. So yeah, you will have the same interface for talking to the system model, having it manipulate in-memory data using a tool interface as you would for calling OpenAI, and it will still manipulate your in-memory data all from the same API.
I'm, yeah, I'm trying to follow your code and trying to figure out like where you call the tools specifically.
So in the wonderful Apple world, all you have to do is pass it the tools. So if
Yeah.
you want to see the actual the nastiness in my code,
I, I,
you're
I
gonna
s- I see that you have an intelligence model and then an intelligence session implementation. You have the Apple one,
yes,
and I see it does session native, respond, sends in the prompts, and you pass
I'm
in to the constructor the tools. Then how's the
yes.
open API or open AI one work?
Oh, sorry, that one's not implemented in the code I've uploaded so far.
I see. Okay, I was like, "Where's the?"
Sorry,
I'm like,
sorry, sorry. My bad. My
where
bad.
is this code?" I was like, I because I see it. I'm like, I don't see it. Okay,
Yeah.
so right now today, it does a thing.
At the
I
time of this recording, yes, I'm
uh,
sorry. I should have been
but
more clear
that's what
there.
you're working
Yeah.
on. Oh, okay, because I was like,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't see it because that sounds cool. Because that is sort of the next level up, I think, of like what we really want these models to do is like being able to do stuff on our behalf, right? I don't like. I think what would be really neat is as we're working with these LMs is like I was thinking about this, for example, for feedback flow. I was talking to Fowler about this, and I was talking to Burke about this. Is like what I really want to type in is, hey, I like right now you paste in a bunch of URLs, but ideally what you would want to do is say, okay, here's what I want to do. Is I want to do here's a URL. I want you to do XYZ, blah, 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 right? And then I want you to like save it and do the, do a bunch of stuff for it, right? And like export it and do stuff. And that would give it a bunch of tools. Like here's how to export it. Here's how to save it. Here's how to go get the comments. Here's how to analyze it. And it would just go do stuff automatically
Yeah.
for me. And then it could give stuff back and I could give it specific tools that I may need based on the user's response. Cause like what, what Bert keeps telling me is he doesn't want to, and you were telling me as well with my diabetic thing, is like this pet diabetes tracker that I have. It should say insulin shot tracker. That's actually what it is. But you don't really want to type things. You don't want to do stuff. And Burke was telling me, oh, for feedback flow, it'd be great if I could like get the data because he's like, I want to put the data in other places. And I was like, hey, just hit the export button. He's like, oh, I got to click 3 buttons to do a thing.
Yeah.
Like I want to say like, oh, here's the URL. And then I put the data in this format and do this thing, blah, 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 blah. Right. And then it could say, oh, like I know how to put it in a CSV file or a JSON file or blob folder, blah, 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 blah. And in fact, even better is like, I don't even need to give some sort of tool. I could just say, here's like an, download, give me string back. I will download a file in this format for you. Right. And like
Yeah.
you decide model how to format it to whatever the user wants. Right. So that's the type of tool that you could give it is like file downloader. And then it's just like, oh, okay, I know what to do.
And that's exactly why I want to get async tools working. Because right now my use case is my tools modify an in-memory data model. And so they
Yeah.
don't really need to be async because it's just doing mostly CRUD operations, manipulate this, add this, delete that, simple things like that. But the moment you want to do like a web request, you really
Yeah.
want that to be async. So that, like, for example, the tools you could register are fetch YouTube comments and whatever, ugly stuff like that that can take a while versus just manipulating an internal data model. So all I can say is I want that too. My goal is always to be Apple Intelligence first because I want this to work on the on-device network first, and I'm just having Swift issues.
Yeah.
Swift concurrency is complicated, James. My God, if they would just implement a garbage collector, it could be so much simpler. But it's so complicated because they refuse to have a garbage collector. So I'm working on it. But I think that's when this library would be able to satisfy your needs too.
That's
I
cool.
mean, you could do a blocking web request too. It'd be fine, It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
You can run this on a background thread. It's not a big deal. It's just the C# way to do that is with async. And so I want to support that.
Anything else you want to talk about this library? I'm excited to give it a try.
No, I really just wanted to say the cross-platform was honestly so that all my existing apps can start taking advantage of on-device networks today. So that was a big goal of it. But the second big goal that I realized right away was these on-device system networks, while great and convenient and secure and all that, I quickly learned that I needed that easy upgrade path to the bigger, crazier networks being hosted in the cloud. So I think those are the two big advantages to bring AI to older apps, but also to have an easy path from the system models up to the big hosted models. I think it's important to have an easy upgrade path between those two and make it easy to switch, make it easy for the user to switch. Maybe they want to downgrade from your pro version back to the free version, and they shouldn't lose all the AI features. They can still use AI features even if they're not paying you.
I like it. Well, cool. Go check it out. I'll put links in the show notes. It is actually just github.com/percolarum/ cross intelligence, and you can get it on Nougat today. It's there.
Yeah. It's
I
a
think
very limited form. Sorry, I just interrupt you, but it's a very limited form. It doesn't have all the features we've talked about here, but I promise those features are coming because I personally need them.
I think if you want to just start playing with Apple Intelligence and Xcode 26, this gives you a reason to try out the betas and go from there. I know. Now, do I need to have the? I need to have the beta Tahoe.
No. So if you have old everything on your computer, you go get my new J, and you just have a device that has iOS 26 on it. Upload this app to an iOS 26 app device, it will work.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
that was the design point I was trying to. It does not require Apple Intelligence. It works even if it's not there.
Very cool. All right, go give it a try, people. Go. And also come back next week when we talk about more AI goodies. But that's going to do it for this week's Emerge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Krueger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.